Vizlib.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey, welcome to Vizlib Appy Hour. This is the show where we help you make your data talk. And I'm joined here today with Emily and Cody. We're all on the Industry Solutions Team at Vizlib. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing great.
Cool. Okay. Do you guys have anything cool to drink today?
Go ahead, Em.
All right. I've got my trusty Hydro Flask, which is, I guess, getting green screened out, but it's covered in our travel stickers. So I love it.
And I don't have anything too fancy. I also have water, but it's just in the generic spring water, not sponsored by Vizlib water bottle.
But if anyone wants to sponsor us, again, you know where to find us.
Yes.
Water. We'll do an app on water. Guys, I've got something super exciting and a little messy. It's our Vizlib beer, because I'm in our Poland office, and I picked the one called Lee Brew because my last name's Lee. So, ha ha ha. So yes, Lee Brew. It's foaming. I think I opened it wrong. I guess I don't know how to open beer because it just keeps foaming, but hopefully it'll stop. I'll keep you guys updated during the show. It hasn't stopped for 20 minutes. We'll see.
Looks like Andy's jealous of your beer.
Oh, we'll send you some. There's a ton in the fridge. It'll probably just explode. Hey, Graham.
Oh, hey, Jocelyn.
Oh, you got a shout out. That's so nice. And today, I think we have a really fun topic. It's not so much, building Vizlib apps, but it's about sneaky data. And we can all talk about what we think is sneaky data. To me, it's when data doesn't give you the full story. Like when they're hiding, when someone's trying to hide data and they use visualizations to kind of conceal things. I'm going to consider that sneaky data or sneaky visualizations. What do you guys think?
I would definitely agree with that. But I think it can even go further to say that sometimes the visualizations we choose either conceal some of the data or they don't show the whole story, or the way that the data is displayed, it almost gives an appearance of the wrong conclusion. The one that comes to mind in that is maps and using area to represent something that's maybe not helpful in those instances.
Yeah, I have a couple. Well, we'll go over them soon. But my opinion on it's a little bit of both from maybe not choosing the right visual, but also the representation to which the data is being shown. And I think, like Jane, like you said, it could have a effect on what you're trying to get the reader or the viewer to choose. If it's like a yes, no, or true or false, if you want someone to pick true or think true is better, they're going to represent that a little favorable. So I think there's also some sneaky aspects of that as well.
Yeah, and we'd love any examples. If you guys have seen any, sneaky data or like visualizations that don't tell the full story, you send it over. We'd love to see examples, and we'd love to hear what you think. All right, we've got some really good examples today. Does anyone want to go first? Does anyone think you're so good and you definitely want to dive in first?
I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you have, Jane.
Yeah, Jane.
Okay.
Jane, why don't you go first?
So we have a nice little Vizlib app, and I just want you guys to see. I just want you to tell me. We're looking at Big Macs. Which country has the most expensive Big Mac?
Oh wow.
Oh, it might be a little
Can't
small.
Was small, was it?
Does that help at all? No, I don't think so.
I think I'm reading Indonesia.
Yeah, we got Indonesia, Colombia. There we go.
There we go.
That's better.
That one Big Mac is over
this is one Big Mac. It's pretty crazy, right? And you're thinking there's no way. I'm getting pranked by the Polish office during Appy Hour. We've got guests. They were nerfing me. Yeah, Vizlib's a really fun office. Now they don't have any more Nerf pellets. Sucks. Okay, but let's see the price adjusted. Now, what do you think is the most expensive?
Well, this looks a little better.
Yes, yeah. So now definitely normalized out. So I'm curious to see where Indonesia is now on that scale.
I would almost, it's very much towards.
Oh, there it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's in the latter half. But yeah, I think this is something where, they might not use all the data points. They might not try to normalize data, and it can tell a false story. And it's technically not lying. Like technically, it's however much, like 7,000, I think, but it's in its own currency. So yeah, you eliminate data and you try to tell your own story. I think that's an example of data being sneaky.
Yeah, I feel like you see this a lot when you're looking at data that should be like normalized by the population of an area. So they're trying to, make a point of like with COVID infection rates and things like that. It's saying, oh, this area is the most highly infected, but really we have to normalize by the population and look at it in an apples to apples.
I see that a lot with greenhouse gases. Like they'll say like this country has the most greenhouse gases, but once you normalize the data, you'll see that like per person, it might be another country. So yeah, I agree. With maps, that's definitely a big one. And just something else that I thought of is like color. Sometimes people can use color to make things stand out or to hide things. To me, this is like a really good example. You see 3 different stacked bars, and this data is all made up. It's random, but like if you choose 2 colors that are very similar, you might not be able to tell the difference, and you're thinking, oh, this one's huge compared to this yellow one. And I think that's data. It's pointing you to a direction. It wants you to think a certain way, and this is what the color does.
I also like / dislike, I guess, depending on which way you frame it. From a sneaky standpoint, this one, I almost interpret it not even what color stands out most, but since the 2 blues are so close, I would think that those 2 measures are comparable. And then the gold is almost like the odd ball out. So the 2 blues are, something that you're comparing. Maybe the gold is that target or something like that. So I would assume that maybe the blues are related in some ways as well. As far as what colors you pick to what you're trying to display. So a lot of confusion here as well.
Here's another question. Do you think that color is blue or purple?
I definitely vote blue.
I vote purple.
See, I think more, we're talking about the middle one, right? Yeah, I'd go.
Yeah, both of these.
I'd go more on the blue scale.
Oh my gosh. Do I see color differently? That's wild.
Dean, another way that I've seen people use color in this way is to like gray out. Like if you have a line chart with many, many series on it, and you gray out every single series except for like 1 or 2 that are of interest. I think it's a great way to like tell a story, kind of like Cody was saying, like you're relating, oh, these are less important and these are more important, kind of like how you said which one stands out the most. But we have to be careful that we're not like leading the audience on to draw a conclusion that's either too specific or distracting them from the entirety of the message that we have in our data set. So I think it has to be used with caution.
So Emily, how would you, if you had to keep the same data set, not highlighting a specific one, how would you change this?
This one specifically, I would just put some higher contrast colors in.
Okay, Jane, what about yourself?
I think I'd agree. Like if you want the 2, I'm going to call them purple / blues. If you want them to be related, just make the contrast bigger. Like one can be dark blue, purple, one can be light, and I agree with Emily.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and depending on what it is, you could also do not a stacked bar chart if they're not aggregating on top of each other. If there are actually independent of one another, you could do a side by side and have 3 bars side by side instead of stacked. Again, with the color as well, though. So definitely, I think color wins here as a way to change it.
Yeah. Does anyone else in the audience have any ways that you think you can represent this better if you don't want people to automatically just assume that like the purple/blue completely outweighs the yellow? Let us know. And when it comes to sorting as well, I think looking at this, I think sorting is also really important here. You don't really know like what is number one. You're going to have to scroll through. And since these two, like INR and MYR, they're kind of similar. You don't know which one's first. It can be hard for the audience to tell. So I think sometimes sorting also really matters if you actually want people to know like what is the greatest and what is the least greatest. Least.
Yeah. I think it depends too, like what is the point that you're trying to make here? Is the story about, the total, or is it about those individual components of the bar? And if it is about those individual components, I would definitely agree with Cody, more of putting them into those groupings and maybe ordering that grouping in like a logical way, like you were saying, Jane. But I think in the way it's displayed right now, it's both unordered and we're not sure what the most important piece of the story is.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is just some of the apps that I've made that I think can be kind of sneaky, but we can definitely go in and look at other examples in the wild that people are actually using and showing to the public. Emily, you're right below me. Do you want to go next?
Sure.
Cool. Okay, that sounds great. Let's see what you have. Okay.
All right. So my sneaky data example has to do with elections in the United States. I think we're all used to seeing maps of the United States colored by different political parties and using that to represent the quote unquote winning party. So this first chart, I have quite a few examples of this, I think from roughly worst to best. So you'll have to bear with me here. So this first chart, this is results by country, and they are shaded according to the winning candidate's percentage of the vote. So it's more on that like population, the number of votes, and who has the winning percentage. So guys, what do you think about this? What do you see when you look at this graph? And I'll just say the year of the election doesn't matter, who the candidates don't matter. Just who do you think won?
So is the blue and the red standing for Republican versus Democrat, or is it?
Yeah, the two primary political parties in the United States.
All right. Okay.
All right. So, I mean, assuming, well, that's the thing. I mean, at first glance, it's like, okay, red won at this. If I'm looking at just color, regardless of the topic of Appy Hour right now, I would say red won. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clearly the most dominant on this.
There's more darker reds than darker blues. I would say there's overall more red kind of there in the center of the map, and as you move your way to the right and upper left. So in this case, I would say red was the winner, just looking at this map.
Yeah. So let me go on to the next one. We'll figure out who won at the end. So this one is popular vote by county, and it's shaded on a scale from red to blue. So it's still looking at the popular vote, just like the number of votes that an individual candidate received.
Jane, why don't you take this one?
I would say the red is still overwhelming, but I'm assuming that like there's more light reds and more dark blues in this one, while the other one I think had more dark reds. So I'm assuming this means there's less like number of reds, but still more reds overall.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that there's also just a lot of purple in this one. Like,
where
did it actually go?
Yeah. Is more purple more blue, or is it more red? Because I guess when you get to the middle of the scale, purple is going to be your center of that gradient.
Yeah. It's going to be really hard to tell which candidate won that specific county.
Yeah.
So probably not very helpful as far as who won. So it's called a cardogram. So it's a distorted map. It's looking at the popular votes again by county, and each county is scaled in proportion to its population. So now we're doing a little bit of that normalization where we bring in some additional information that might help us to see potentially which candidate won in relation to the population.
I think we should first say this kind of looks like an ink plot that you would see in those movies. And you see like a psychologist that flip the cards.
Yeah.
Like, what do you see when you see this? Can we
Yeah,
start there
quickly.
first?
What do you guys see when you see this?
I see a bird with wings.
Maybe if you
Yeah.
squint, like the
Going like
phoenix
this?
rising from the dust.
Yes.
Yeah, I
that's
do
what-
see that.
Yes. If you squint and turn your head to the left type of thing. Yeah, I got you. Popular vote by county. Each county is scaled to the population. So I like this because you're starting to get into that, depending on the population of the county, because that's big. You can have a population of 100 and that be dark red, and then, compare it to a population of 1 million.
Right.
So I like that it's taking that into account. But as far as a visual representation, yes.
We're not getting much.
The red to me still feels overwhelming, right?
Yeah, I still see. If I were to say, is this more red or blue? I would say red still in this case.
Yeah.
I feel like the purples are leaning to the blue side on this one. I don't know. That's kind of my gauge on this. But I agree. We're not able to draw any conclusion from this. I can't even tell which state and which county belongs to what state. Nothing.
I'm interested to see where this was posted and who was taking in this information.
Most of my data I got from Wikipedia.
Okay.
Which was also drawn from other sources. So we'll dig into that later. Let's see. We've got a lot of people agreeing with your bird, Cody.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, Joe said a very sick bird.
Sick bird.
Okay.
I can't even tell which state is which at this point.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean,
maybe except for Florida. I think we maybe.
Florida.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like if you were looking at this and you had no context that it was voting in the United States and they just said, "Hey, what is this?"
Yeah.
I don't think people's top 3 guesses would be the United States.
Yeah, we definitely would have gotten a lot of birds.
Birds, definitely birds.
All right, so let's go on to the next one. So, how many of you are familiar with the electoral votes? That is actually how a president can win the election in the United States, is by winning electoral votes, not by winning popular votes.
Yep.
So the next few charts go through the same data, but using the electoral votes instead of the popular votes. So now we're looking at each state shaded or colored by the winning candidate's party. So all of this is saying that, Washington is blue because the electoral votes all went blue in that state.
Okay.
What are we seeing now?
Still, I mean, I think maybe it's definitely a little bit more even. I know red is taking up. I first say red only because it's more central and that's where I look first. But when you add up all the blues around the outer edge, it'd probably be pretty close, in my opinion.
A lot of small states.
Yeah, I think I counted 23. So
we're still looking at number of states and the area that those states take up.
To me, red still feels over. I would say red takes up 3/5 of the map, maybe even 3/4 of the map.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's time to check into my beer. Still foaming, guys.
No sips yet. Okay.
No.
Don't worry. I have a few more graphs that we can go through first. Okay. So this is the same type of cardogram, but it's looking at those electoral votes. So now our states are scaled by the number of electoral votes that they have, and you can see a better outline of each of those states. So it's looking maybe a little bit more like the United States.
Yep.
Squished. And so now what are you saying?
Blue. I think blue is.
Yeah, I think this is the first one where I really felt blue overpowered the red.
Yeah. think the problem with a lot of the first charts is that the area, the size of the state is so prominent, and it's deceiving us to think that those large area states also have a large population. That's an assumption that we're making with that visual representation. But what this view is trying to show us is that the population is what matters, and that's how those electoral votes are determined. So yes, we have electoral votes that are shaping the size of our map, and we're starting to see a different picture now.
Yep.
Jackie Daytona says, nice way to hide the data.
Yeah. Now we have another version of that. I think this one gets a little bit more clear because we can see like, okay, we're seeing like the same states that are represented. And then just the size of the bubble is representing the number of electoral votes that each of those states have. So they're laid out in a similar fashion to the United States, but they're not, expected to represent the states in any way. So this one I think is kind of neat. What do you guys think with this map? Do you still see that same blue balance?
So I definitely see blue being more bigger bubbles in this case. The one thing I do like about this is it's taking, again, into account both who won and the size being the electoral votes is great. The one thing that we don't have here from a context standpoint is the number of votes correlating to how bigger the bubble is. So you look at California and Texas, right? Is that 1 vote more or is it 20 votes more?
Right. So we don't know how many electoral votes that state has.
Yeah.
So
that would be my kind of knock on this. Other than that, if we had a little legend that said that the size of the bubble, I think this one would be pretty fair and not too sneaky.
Yeah.
Maybe they could start with like the smallest bubble size all the way to the biggest bubble size.
Yeah.
Yep. Give us a way to see kind of that progression. Totally agree. So still hiding some data, but getting more and more clear.
Getting there.
Okay. Now, every grid space on this map represents an electoral vote. So Cody, what you were getting at there was you don't know how many California versus Texas has. Yep. So now each square is representing an electoral vote, so we can see it maybe a little bit more clearly where in the last chart it looked like Alaska and Hawaii were the same size. We now know that Hawaii actually has 1 more electoral vote than Alaska.
So I kind of think they lost a little bit here. I thought the last graph or visual rather, it was getting better and better. And I think this one they took a step back. I think they got the relative as far as how many votes, but I think they lost the readability.
Okay.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree because just to me, Alaska looks so much smaller than Hawaii, even though it's only off by 1 because just Hawaii, it feels bigger for some reason.
Laying it out. Yeah. So maybe this one would have been great if it was just like a simple waffle. And we were just looking at number of electorals. Joe says a Cardo waffle chart. I like it. Yep. Awesome. I think I have one more. So here we have the map of the United States represented the way that you would normally see it. And each point on the map represents an electoral vote, and it is colored by the winning party. So now we're getting kind of back to maybe the best of all worlds where we've got a map, we have all the electoral votes and the color representing the winning party.
So I would, out of all the ones that you've shown, other than my bird, I would love, I think this one would be the best representation.
That's a really great point.
That's true.
Because the Electoral College will take like an hour to explain, I think. People are like, wait, what? I don't get it.
Well, I like that point that it looks like only the people in the center of the state vote, because it's basically saying that the map is deceiving now in the sense that it's showing those electoral votes only in the center of the state. And so you're not seeing.
Yeah, I think if someone were to follow elections and how they display different counties and stuff like that, I think they would be confused by this graph. as Jackie said, because they're looking for that county by county breakdown or the regional breakdown of the state. Where if people didn't know about that, maybe people don't know it's by county or something like that, they look at this and maybe that's not their first thought. I would say like I said, this is my favorite. I think the best visual representation, the cleanest and readability aspect of it. But like you still have to like manually count how many dots to really see. You can't look at this and be like, oh, it's blue or oh, it's red.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot. Yes, blue has a lot of the bigger ones, but red might have a lot more smaller ones that add up. So, I think that would be my only knock on this chart.
Yeah, usually those election results are fairly close when it comes down to the electoral votes, and having all of this information scattered across a map makes it really difficult for our eyes to perceive who the winner really is. So it's nice visually when you're looking at, images on your favorite news channel or something, but maybe not the most effective when it comes to actually displaying this information.
I think most of the time too, when you're on those news channels, right, they're usually breaking down a region or a specific state. They're not often too many times analyzing the entire map all at once. More times than not, maybe they start there, but they always dig into a region, a state, a county, one of the major counties that, typically swing right or left type of thing. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think that's all of my versions of ways to display election results in the United States. And I think overall, my conclusion here is that we have to be really careful when we're putting maps on our in visualizations and how we're representing data in that. And I think area, as we saw, can be very misleading. And so thinking about how, carefully how we're using that map and maybe using it less for displaying measures, so displaying like numerical values, but more for displaying, something categorical where we're just grouping different countries or regions or things like that.
So Emily, your Emily Klein's top 3 things when putting a map on a dashboard. What would be your top 3 things?
My top 3 things. Know what your data story is.
Okay.
That'd be number 1. Once you know what your data story is, make sure that you represent the data clearly. So by that, I mean, if you want to display a measure, looking at maybe points and like using the sizing of a point to represent that information rather than like we saw the area and shading. So know your data, think about how you represent it. Then I would just say simplify. I like that they're focusing on 2 colors. They're not, doing, well, there were a few gradients, but they weren't too excessive. We saw how ineffective those gradients were. But if we even have categories, not doing more than 4 or 5 and making sure those colors really stand out. So just simplify the information. I think our eyes get a little bit overwhelmed by maps. And so thinking carefully about how we do it.
Yep.
I think it's really important to make sure that, especially like map data, is very accurate and it tells the whole story. Because I feel like most of the times where you see map data, it's on the news or it's giving you like critical information. So if it's hard to read or it's so easy to distort data, as you saw. So I think because it is usually for the news, it's important to know how to read map data and to make sure you know what is going on and to make sure it is normalized so you're getting the full story. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a really great example. For me, it's like global warming and like emission of greenhouse gases. I see that one not normalized all the time. If anyone in the audience has like off the top of their head, know of examples of when you saw that data was not normalized, but it's shown everywhere and you keep seeing the same data pop up, let us know. And Cody, do you have any examples off the top of your head where you've just seen recently where data is not normalized or you're representing it?
No, I think the one, I think we had this discussion earlier in the week with, when a lot of the COVID data started to come out, it was like one of those things that people checked every day. And from a data nerd like ourselves, right? I mean, we could kind of read through the lines a little bit, but the average person looking at a heat map with all these red dots and all these metrics and all these key things like that, all these buzzwords, I think it's really overwhelming, especially when you take into account, you have a third world country versus, something else where maybe their numbers aren't as, legit or something like that. So one of the things was, I forget what country or state it was, but
I have a
Yeah.
great example that I'll pull up right
Yeah.
now. This is just the Google. I mean, if you just Google COVID, right now in Poland, but I live in France, so I've looked up COVID-19 France. It's all in French. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
But yeah, if you look at this, France not doing so well, but if it's not normalized at all. So you're
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, Norway's so like they're, it's so small. They have like such few cases compared to the UK, France, and Germany. But that makes sense, right? Because there's less people in
Yeah.
Norway.
Yep. So Emily, you mentioned that in the beginning of the call, right? Having that normalization of, by population, by person. I think that's huge. And that's not one of the things that I think they originally put out when everything was still so new. People just kind of took it as this country is bad, this country is not as bad, or maybe they didn't have any testing at that country. So obviously you're not going to have higher rates if there's very little or no testing.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at the data now, in the very start of COVID, I'm sure people are so sick of COVID, but I think it's just such a good example, and it's just data that's being thrown in our face all the time.
Yeah.
So it's a great learning tool. Yeah, in the beginning, there weren't too many cases, but as you said, there was no testing. So, you got to think about the bias when collecting data, etc. So, yeah, and now that COVID testing is readily available, at least in France, more people are getting tested and whatnot. But you can also look at hospitalizations. You can see that one looked so much more scary. Here it still is scary, but it's not as scary. You don't see that huge rise in hospitalizations. So yeah, I totally agree. You got to think about where your data is coming from, how it's collected, and how it's being normalized. Joe says,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Joe has just said most data are just population charts. I agree. I don't know what XKCD is, but I do agree. Yeah, usually map data is just population data.
Yeah. In Yogi's comment before that, he was talking about survival and death rates are often not normalized, and it's for a purpose. They're trying to sell a product or medicine, and they're trying to get a point across. So they'll make it look as extreme as possible. And so sometimes data is sneaky unintentionally, like some of the charts that we were just looking at, but sometimes it's intentional, and that we also have to be aware of when we're, reading up articles and things like that.
Totally agree. Cody, do you have anything cool to show? A little update. It has kind of stopped filming, but still going a little bit.
Maybe by the end of Appy Hour, you'll be able to drink your
I'll finally see through all the foam.
There you go. Yes, I do. I'm not sure. Do you have to switch screens over there?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
Am I scrolling?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I have a couple, and actually, we just got done talking about news-related stuff, and often the charts that are coming from the news because they're trying to maybe force a story on you or trying to represent in different ways. So all these 13 different charts and graphs here are either deception based on the story they're trying to tell or just a total misrepresentation or scale related. So we were talking about earlier with the scale of the bubble, right? What does a bigger bubble show? Is it 1 vote? Is it 10 votes? Is it 100 votes? We don't know. So there's 13 here. Some of them I'll skip the ones that aren't that great. But this one right here, I think is really good. So this was gun deaths in Florida. So number of murders committed using firearms. So you're looking at this chart, you're seeing that numbers are actually going up and then they're going down again. But when you actually look in this further, the scale is actually in reverse. So it's actually inverted. So 0 is not at the bottom. 800 is at the bottom. So I'll leave it to you guys before I, show the reason why I don't like it or how it's deceiving.
Wait, so there was a lot, and then it went down, and then it went up again.
Yes.
It looks like they're trying to
What?
say that this stand your ground law actually
Decreased.
helped decrease the number of deaths or
And
murders using firearms.
And that news source, it's BuzzFeed News. A lot of people read BuzzFeed. It's like a really popular news site, especially for the younger population.
Yeah.
Oh
so this one, when you look at it, it's all right. The number of deaths were going up, and then they went down, and they went back up again. But in reality, obviously the scale is inverted, so really it was going down then up. So a couple things I don't like about this is, one, I think more times than not, you see 0 being at the bottom. When I see 0 being at the top, I'm thinking, a waterfall chart or negative values when I see numbers below 0. And then the other thing too on this as well is the way you read it is actually opposite from what the scale is going. So, you see a positive change, but the numbers are actually going down. So it's kind of the exact opposite of how you would read it. A line going up is actually decreasing the metric. So those are the two things I really didn't like about this chart, and something that is really confusing as well for this one.
Cody, I also just noticed the x-axis scale is actually rather interesting. So they have 1990s, 2000s, and then 2010s. Is just a small sliver. And so I wonder if they're trying to amplify 1990s and 2000s and maybe not let us see so much of the 2010s and how that impacts what data they're hiding there.
I have an example of time series to come. So this is another one as far as visualization. So I think this is, when we say news trying to come across of telling you the story, so with Obamacare enrollment, right? And you can see the title at the time, 7 million was 5 times more than 6 million. So when you see 6 million taking up, 1, 2, 3 rows, and all of a sudden 7 million is now 5 times more than that, it means you to believe that this chunk of the graph is so much more. And I think the news here is trying to show you that, hey, this is where we want to go because it's a goal. Look how far down we are, or something like that. So maybe this news was maybe a knock against Obamacare and trying to show you this is how much we have to go. When in reality, it's maybe not that much. So what do you guys think about this one?
Cody, you've hit on one of my biggest pet peeves.
What's that?
I'm a big proponent for 0 axis scales. So making sure that your axis starts at 0, because we are distorting the data. Sometimes we see it as, oh, I'm amplifying that difference. I'm enabling my audience to see maybe a better change, particularly when we're looking at line graphs. We're maybe thinking that we're giving them better or more information by reducing that scale on the axes. Mm-hmm. But really, like what you're showing here, all we're doing is we're amplifying it in a way that distorts the value. So we're not seeing how close 6 million and 7 million are, or how far we've come to get to 6 million. We're just seeing that there's a large gap between the 6 million and 7 million.
Yeah. Jane, anything to add on that one?
I totally agree. Always start any y-axis at 0, and I think that should just be a rule. I don't know why anyone would ever just cut off.
Yeah, I mean, I know as we know, developing workbooks and dashboards, right? Like sheet real estate and page real estate is a real thing, Mm-hmm. So it's like, do I want one long big bar that's just all empty to show 6 billion, or do I want a shorter bar to save space? So I understand why people do it. I just think from a reader standpoint, we're so accustomed to seeing 0 at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it's going to look distorted no matter what. So I'd rather maybe change the, maybe the amount of ticks on the y-axis to maybe help with that spacing. But definitely interesting.
Yeah, to address Yogi's question, I don't know that I can think of any cases where I wouldn't use a 0 scale. I mean, the only one maybe is in more of like an infographic where you're trying to be really artistic with your data, and those are usually intended to be read with a lot of intent and spend a lot of time kind of going through the information. So that's maybe the only time I would consider not using a zero scale. What about you guys, though?
I don't know. I honestly I can't think of one off the top of my head other than sheet real estate, but I think there's other ways around that.
How do you guys feel when a chart, they'll start at 0, but then they'll kind of have a squiggly line, they'll cut out the middle portion and then just go straight to the top? Is that the same as not starting at 0?
I think it's even worse.
Yeah.
That's basically the same as not starting at 0.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
How would you represent that chart? Is there a better way? Maybe just only show the difference rather than,
a lot of times change is a better way. So like showing, in my line chart example, if you have two like overtime series and you want to show, you'll chart the difference between those two series instead of charting the actual value, or chart the two individual values with the overlay of the difference, if that's what's important.
So like we talk about like waterfall charts, right? So in this one here this one's actually a target. So this would be good. So this would be your starting, this would be your ending, and then you would have that middle waterfall kind of bar showing that change. Yeah. So even for that, if that one didn't start at 0, to keep with that theme, I think it would still make sense because all 3 pillars are going to be proportional and relevant to each other. Still, obviously, would want to start at 0. But, since all 3 of those bars would be relative scale to one another, might be a little bit better. These next two, again, have kind of like the relative value. So this one is kind of, honestly, more of a dirty data than anything else. But these two are both 37%, but somehow one bar is higher than the other. And then this one, too. This is actually, so this one wasn't in the news. This is actually in a baseball game. And you see 77 miles an hour compared to, this year. In this case, 2013, 2012 was 2 miles an hour slower, but they create the illusion that it was such a high drop off here. So again, going back to the scale.
I feel like they just randomly put into, you could have just shown numbers, why even have bars at this point?
Yeah. And honestly, maybe it was, looks like was it the Blue Jays potentially? Yeah. Yeah, Blue Jays. Maybe they were away, right? And maybe the home team was showing this graph or something like that. I mean, so again, portraying that story of he had a really bad drop off, this season. Or maybe whoever's in their visual department just thought that was a good idea. We won't go over this one. This one's just kind of more funny than anything else. It adds up to 110%. Same with this one. This one's more funny than anything else. What costs less, a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk? Yes and no. So, I mean, this one could be, I wouldn't say sneaky, but more or less from a reader standpoint, just really make sure you're reading the graph before you take into account.
Make sure your titles match what the graph is saying.
Exactly. I guess it's more of a developer self-check than anything else. Emily, your favorite, the pie graphs, right? Yes versus.
Is this the worst pie chart I've ever seen?
Honestly, no, probably not. I'm sure you've seen your fair share. Which one was a good one? I believe this one. So this one's another good stuff. They're all 26%, right? But somehow the junior class is way more. So a lot of these go to representation and scale is really kind of the name of the game in my visuals, and kind of the reason why I picked this specific rundown of visuals, both from a scale and representation standpoint. And Emily, this is the time series graph I was telling you, right? So we have last year, last week, and current, right? So we have something that was 365 days apart versus 7 days apart, but somehow the scale between each is the same.
Yeah, it's very misleading. I mean, at first glance, we'd think, oh, it's starting to plateau. But yeah, that's between last week and this week. So yeah, probably shouldn't have changed very much.
And it's funny because now the y-axis actually makes sense because these are relative. You have a good, 34, cent change, 6 cent change. Like that is probably relatively good from a representation standpoint. But now your x-axis is way off. So the past visuals we've been talking about are y-axis scales. This doesn't start at 0, however, but just to throw it out. But in this case, our y-axis is okay, and the jumps, but now our x-axis just doesn't make any sense.
And they're all coming from like news sources. I mean,
yeah, and that's yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, they're taking this in and they're doing something with it. They're thinking about it. They're probably telling other people. That's not good.
Yep. And again, here another representation. So, like I said, the few reasons why I picked this is, what story are they trying to convey, the scale of it, and also, the representation of it as well. So, Emily, for you, with your maps, your suggestions for me, my suggestions here, as a developer, and you're developing these for an audience, is one, like you said with the maps, what are you trying to tell? What story are you trying to tell here? Don't make it complicated. Often the most complex problems are solved with the most simplest charts. And then, thirdly, just check your numbers. If it doesn't make sense to you, or if you have to think about what it says, your reader's not going to know what it says because you're the one developing it. If you have questions about it, they're guaranteed to have questions about it. So like you said, keep it simple.
I mean, that's well said.
Yeah.
Does anyone else in the audience have you seen any outrageous charts or anything other than, things starting at 0? I think this one's still the craziest to me. Like everything about it is wrong. I don't know why it's inversed. I don't.
This one's my favorite, honestly, because the other thing too is usually when you think of area charts, forget the y-axis for a second. To me, the area is always underneath the line, regardless of, say, to me, that red is the chart background or the visual background, and then the white is actually the area of the chart or the line itself. So it totally throws you off. I often don't look at the y-axis first. I look at the visual, and then I start to follow the numbers and see what it's trying to say. But here, you really have to read into it to say, okay, number of murders. I have a y-axis that starts at 800 or 1,000, goes up to 0. They're not negative numbers, which is another interesting thing. Like I said, I would assume anything below 0 is negative. So, yeah, it's just a lot.
I mean, I totally agree. This, I didn't even catch it at first that it started at 1,000 and went to 0. Did you guys catch it at first?
The only reason I did was because they cleverly labeled the last and the first, measures. And so I thought that was interesting. I certainly think that without those labels, this would have been a much more deceiving chart because it would have taken us a lot longer to get to reading the axes and dissecting that information.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a real interesting one.
Yeah, I'd say this one's my favorite for so many different wrong reasons.
Yeah, it does not make any sense to me at all.
So guys, do you have any resources for our audience that help when we're trying to put together charts and making sure that we're not telling a story that's deceiving or sneaky in some way?
Oh, I love our pro tip. Just don't ever use this chart.
Thank you.
For me, I mean, I wouldn't say resources, but kind of my tips and trick that I learned, when I first started dashboarding with one of my professors in college was, he used the phrase, code a little, test a little. I kind of put that into visualizations. Start very simple. Does it answer your question? If it does answer your question, stop. If it doesn't answer your question, add something else, and then just keep on going from there. This way, you're ensuring yourself that you're keeping it simple. If you're going 0 to complex in your first try, you're going to hit a lot of those marks in between where you could have answered it, 5 measures ago or 5 colors, ago, type of thing. So resources, I'm not sure, but just kind of a pro tip, kind of using that code a little, test a little from a computer science background, putting it into a visual. Start simple. Ask yourself, does it tell the story I'm trying to convey? Does it answer our question? If it does, stop. You're good. If not, keep going.
Oh, that's a great tip. I have a resource, and it's actually Reddit. I don't know. Reddit can actually be really helpful. There's I don't know what it's called, a stream, a channel, a thread. What's it called? Like an r/something.
I've never been on Reddit, so I can't help you.
No, I'm not sure.
I'm not up with the Reddit lingo, but if anyone, a subreddit. Thank you, Joe. There's a subreddit. It's called Data is Beautiful, and they have a lot of like great graphs. Sometimes their graphs don't make any sense. I've seen some bad ones on there, but some of them are good. You can actually learn a lot from there. People just post tips. Here's one I actually saw today. It's just a quick tip on like how to make charts better. It's is this, not that, and you can see it's kind of like that bar chart. If you had cut it off on here, I think it would have told like a wildly different story than if you showed, the change or like a line chart. So yeah, I think Reddit is a really good resource, and it's free, and it's free for everybody.
Yeah, no, I like this. I guess another good example would be watch the news and then just do the complete opposite.
Yeah, you definitely taught us that, Cody.
Yeah. No, I do think some people actually learn. I think we learn better from what knowing not to do, because you kind of know when it's too far versus not enough. So I think this is a perfect example. You look at the thing on the right versus the thing on the left. I will say, from this visual, it is sneaky, because I would assume the thing on the left is something you wouldn't do. Because when you look at before and after pictures, usually the before, the bad, is on the left, and the good, it's on the right.
Yeah. So the whole thing is sneaky.
The whole thing is sneaky. If I had a mic, it would be dropped right now. That would be my thing. Usually before and after pictures, usually the bad things on the left, the good things on the right.
And another thing about the news is like usually when they show you a graph, it's not long enough for you to digest anything. It's like boom, and then it's gone. So if someone showed me this and then took it away, I wouldn't see this as like prior year versus current year. I thought they would just chose these colors because it looked nice, and I'd be like, oh, it's going up and then going down. I wouldn't know it was a comparison between two different things. So I think that's also kind of sneaky the way they did that. There's definitely good representations like you see here.
It's really hard to see in the graph on the right that the trend changes, that the dark blue line goes below the light blue line when it's represented in bars. So I love this one. This is a great example, Jane. Yeah. Some of my resources that I use a lot are books. So I'm not big on Reddits and blogs and things like that, but I do love, and I reference often, my Storytelling with Data book. I really think that thinking about each individual chart as a story and bringing that story together is super important. So I love how logically that the Storytelling with Data book brings that information out and helps you to kind of think through it. And I also really like the book, How Charts Lie. I think that's Alberto Cairo's book. And that one is a great book just to understand some of these deceptive charts that we brought up in our conversation today. And, like Cody was saying, learn from what not to do. I think that book really helps us to learn a lot from what we shouldn't do.
Those are all great. If anyone in the audience has any good resources or good books that they could recommend for people to learn more about, like how to tell a story, how not to tell a story, and good and bad examples, and just where to learn to visualize data correctly, let us know. Awesome. Okay.
Well, Jane, can we get an update on your beer?
Yeah.
It stopped, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers. Jane can finally drink her beer.
Yeah, it took so long. This is the Lee brew. It's like the library beer, actually, and it's a Marzen beer. I don't know what Marzen is. I don't know if anyone else does, but it has made a mess. Man.
Well, I hope it tastes good.
Yes, me too. I haven't tried it yet. But thanks, guys, for coming on, and thank you, audience, for watching. Let us know if there's anything you want to see next. We have a lot of great upcoming shows planned. And thank you, Emily and Cody, for being a guest and coming on and showing all of us, bad chart examples.
Sneaky chart examples.
Thanks,
Sneaky
everyone.
chart examples. All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See ya.
See you.
Bye.